and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Explosions in Qatar's capital Doha tonight as Iran targets US air bases following America's weekend attacks on nuclear sites. NATO allies agree to a 5% defence budget increase as leaders gather for the Hague summit. And the Tesla Robotaxi is finally launched as it hit the roads in Austin, Texas. Iran has fired missiles at Qatar tonight in retaliation to the US attack on their nuclear bases at the weekend. Iran's Tasnim news agency confirmed the operation was called Annunciation of Victory. The strike came hours after Qatar closed its airspace amid safety fears. Qatar says no casualties have been reported, but it strongly does condemn the attack. To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Managing Director of This is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, and Correspondent and Columnist, Gemma White. So Israel threatened to retaliate, Michael. Iran threatened to retaliate. I do apologise to everyone. After the weekend, now we know Iran has retaliated. What's the latest?
According to the protocols of the global community, Iran played by the rules. They said that they would retaliate. They gave warning that they would retaliate, and they did retaliate. And they did it in about as acceptable a way as you would hope. The key now will be if the US will let it lie, or if they feel they will have to respond to this retaliation.
So what was interesting, news we're getting about that retaliation, is the New York Times reports Iran informed Qatar in advance of the strikes of US bases. So we know, Gemma, Qatar closed its airspace earlier today. But Iran, of course, well, as I just said, gave them a heads up, if reports are to believe, about these attacks.
Yeah, so Qatar has closed its airspace, and so has Bahrain and Kuwait. Yes, we've been told that there was a heads up given. We don't know when it was given. Was it given before the missiles were launched? Was it given when the missiles were in the air? But it was given, so we know that was done. They've been very keen to point out that their argument is not with Qatar, who they called their friendly and brotherly neighbour, but Qatar has said it does reserve the right to respond. Now, there's 8,000 citizens at the US airbase, working in and around. So there's US and UK citizens been told to shelter in place, not as a all-out warning, but more as a, let's be aware about the situation and what's going on. And obviously the airport has closed in Doha, Hamad International, and it's one of the top 10 busiest airports in the world. So obviously flights diverted, and these guys see like 140,000 passengers a day. So the knock-on effect for that is still going to be felt.
So it's a significant moment right now, isn't it, in the crisis that we've been seeing happening, Michael, and Udaydah, as you also said, struck. And I was just thinking right now, for people who are living in Qatar and living in the Middle East, that feeling, how are you feeling? Have you heard from anybody in Qatar?
So I lived in Doha for 4 years, and I lived in the Pearl, which is something similar to Dubai's marina. It's a very expat-filled community. It's right on the water. It's very Western in many ways. Doha has many conservative areas, but the Pearl is not like that at all. And the people that I spoke to on the Pearl said that they could see the rockets coming in, and then, of course, them being shot down by the defense systems in Qatar. So it is not something that is just what you would see on social media. This was real for a lot of people. And when you're living in the GCC, in Doha and Dubai in particular, I think people feel a false sense of safety. And this is about as real as it gets. And a lot of people experienced it firsthand. Fortunately, nobody was injured, but it is a little bit scary. And I know that people that I would have worked with there, as well as people who I work with here, receiving messages from family back home asking if everything's okay.
And I wonder, Gemma, because I'm receiving messages from back home, everyone asking me, is everything okay? What's the latest? And I think a lot of us weren't expecting this missile strike on Qatar, even though Iran was warning it. It seems a little bit of a shock, really, for us.
It is, even when if it is expected, it's still a shock. I was in Qatar for the World Cup. So thinking about all those places that I was visiting, and now people are frightened and there's missiles going overhead, is quite crazy from that point of view. But yeah, I think everyone's been getting phone calls and messages from home, asking what's going on. And obviously, flights are being stopped as well. I think British Airways have stopped flights to Dubai. And obviously, that brings Dubai's name into the mix. And Dubai is quite a headline-making, city. So that's kind of increased headlines around the world. People are wanting to know what's going on. But obviously, with US bases around the Middle East, we were expecting an attack, but you didn't know, was it going to be Bahrain, was it going to be Egypt? We didn't actually know where it was actually going to happen.
But let's just go back, because obviously all of us woke up to the news yesterday morning, Sunday morning, that the US had struck these 3 nuclear sites in Iran. Donald Trump said within 2 weeks. It probably happened sooner than a lot of people were expecting. But where do we find ourselves now, Michael, in the situation in the Middle East? There's been so much talk about how much damage has really been done to the nuclear sites. Has Iran managed to move out a lot of that enrichment material? Or is it all about regime change? There seems to be so many questions as we are in the fog of war.
So I think what you have to remember is that you have 2 players at the table, and Israel on the outskirts. You have the US right now, and you have the Iranians. And the Iranians know that the main player in this is the US. If they can get the US on side, then that will stop the Israelis from doing whatever it is that they want to do. And I think that, the Iranians feel betrayed from a diplomatic point of view, which is what the foreign minister had said. And they also understand that they need to make sure that they engage with the Americans, and they need to prove to the Americans that they are going to be willing to negotiate. Now, they say that they were negotiating in good faith. The Americans, I don't know if the Americans believe that or not. It seems as though they didn't, because they went ahead and they bombed the 3 nuclear facilities. But moving forward, what's going to happen is that they're going to have to hopefully stop the escalation. They're going to have to de-escalate, and they're going to have to then actually agree to meet and have some real negotiations.
But I mean, how much bargaining chips do they have? What does Iran have? If it goes into negotiations now, it's going to be a difficult conversation for them. They almost feel like in some ways they're being pushed into the back of the wall right now, and it's how to respond to that. But Gemma, I've been speaking to a lot of people that I've been interviewing about regime change in Iran and the possibility of that. We know Marco Rubio over in the US was pretty adamant that wasn't going to happen. Donald Trump kind of hinting at it on Truth Social.
It was less a hint, really. It was regime change with lots of exclamation marks,
Exactly.
which he's not a subtle man. So, there's a lot of confusion. I mean, I think a couple of times now he's mentioned regime change. But that's kind of in opposition to what the Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, and Vice President Vance have both said. It's not about regime change. So either that's a disagreement or there's a communication failure.
No, and I would agree. Yeah. I think that really stands out. And I don't know if we can bring Michael into the conversation, but we hear the likes of Hegseth and J.D. Vance talking, and they say Americans want this attack to be one and done.
Yeah, one and done.
And that's what they're saying. We've gone in, precise attacks. We knew exactly where we were going. Now we're back in America. We're out. But is that realistic?
I don't think it is realistic. I also don't think that there's, I've talked about this many times, I don't think that the US administration has a long-term strategy. You know, there's what you're going to do before, and then there's what you're going to do the day of, and then what are you going to do the day after. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the biggest faults of the American administrations over the decades is that when they do go in somewhere, they don't have a game plan in place for what's next.
But falling on America's side here slightly, this probably came as a surprise to them too. But
why could you not have put the brakes on the Israelis and said, we need to have proper sit-down negotiations? I know what happened. Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, were adamant that now was the moment, not because Iran is close to perfecting a nuclear bomb. It's because all of the proxies in the region are weaker. Hamas is weaker. Hezbollah is pretty much decimated. Syria was an ally. Assad is gone. The Russians are completely involved with what's going on in the Ukraine, and the Russians traditionally would have sided with the Iranians. Now was an opportunity that the Israelis saw where they could strike at Iran and there would be minimal repercussions. They did that. They did that for about a week, and then the Americans came in and they dropped the big loads. And the Iranians now are pushed into a corner, as you said earlier. Their backs are against the wall. But they now need to somehow figure out a way to get the Americans to believe that they're prepared to have serious conversations. And the Americans, in turn, are going to have to somehow allow the Iranians to save a little bit of face and come to the negotiating table as equals.
Which is going to be interesting to see play out, because Iran's foreign minister was in Russia today asking for Russia's help. Russia condemned the US strikes on Iran, but didn't offer any concrete, help, because obviously Russia might not be in the position right now. They've got a war going against Ukraine. But it just seems to be, of course, the axis of resistance has been weakened for Iran. But it's like, where do we go next? That's the confusing question.
Well, Khamenei has talked about everlasting consequences, hasn't he? Like, the rhetoric is still, could be a forever war, irrespective of, what happens. And I think even if there is a diplomatic solution found, I still don't believe that will lead to peace between them.
This is one of the issues that the Iranians have, is that the language is always very bombastic. Traditionally, it's death to America, right? Death to Israel. And one of their weaknesses is that there isn't, for Trump, it's make America great again. For the Iranians, they don't have make Iran great again.
Trump did say that today.
Yeah, he's tried to make that happen.
Yes.
He's trying to make that point.
Absolutely he is. And I think that when we're talking about regime change, the big question is, all right, who? And there isn't that who's next. There are different people who would say different people, but there isn't the obvious choice. And I think that's one of the big issues. And, everybody thought that once Saddam was gone, the world would be a safer place. And of course, it turned out not to be the case. And I would want this is where it's frustrating that the American administration does not have a clear-cut strategy where they bring people together, they tell them what they're going to do, they have many conversations, publicly and privately, as they're trying to lay out the plan, the strategy, and then you try to poke holes into that strategy, so hopefully it becomes stronger and stronger, and then you start to involve others and more members of the global community. And there isn't any of that. And when there isn't any of that, it's not because they're trying to be secret, it's because, in my humble opinion, I don't think that they know what's next.
But as we have seen this evening, Iran has hit back at this US airbase in Qatar. No casualties as of yet, but 11 days of conflict. we're still in this crisis at the moment and what seems to be unfolding in the Middle East. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that. We're going to move on to another story. It's actually related in many ways. World leaders are preparing to appear at the NATO summit in The Hague this week with a focus on increasing defence spending to 5%. Earlier today, the alliance's Secretary General, Mark Rutte, said the new baseline from allies would mean thousands more tanks and armoured vehicles. Just take a listen to what he had to say.
The defence investment plan that allies will agree in The Hague introduces a new baseline, 5% of GDP to be invested in defence. This is a quantum leap that is ambitious, historic and fundamental to securing our future. But let me give you a few examples of what we will invest in. A 5-fold increase in air defence capabilities, because we see Russia's deadly terror from the skies over Ukraine every day. And we must be able to defend ourselves from such attacks.
So, Gemma, we just heard from Mark Rutte there, 5% defence increase. That's a lot.
Ambitious is right.
Very ambitious.
Yes.
And really, I feel like it's come from President Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. I think the world is probably in agreement with that. Have all NATO allies now agreed to this substantial rise?
It is substantial. You're right that this was driven by Trump and Hegseth. But obviously, Rutte is friends with Trump, so he was, fully backing it as well. So all members have, but they also haven't. It's a bit of a complex issue. So all 32 members have agreed on this. But Spain has asked for a change in wording so that if they don't meet the goal, that there's no there aren't any repercussions anyway. This isn't legally binding. If people don't meet the percentage, it's not like they get kicked out of NATO or anything like that. So what's interesting to know is that there are some members who still haven't reached the 2% GDP. Now, that goal was set a decade ago. So to set a goal of 5% by 2035 is incredibly ambitious. The UK also looks like it's not going to achieve that goal. They're still not at 3%. So it's a huge reach for sure. I wonder if a lot of the members did it through gritted teeth, but also to keep Trump on side, to keep him sweet, to keep him happy. And it has made him happy because over the years, he has expressed a lot of discontent with NATO. In his first term, he told them all that they owed America so much money, and he was quite sort of angry because he told the Europeans, you only, you provide 30% of NATO funding. So, from his point of view, he feels they're not pulling their weight financially.
And I think in his first term, Germany never, in his opinion, did enough. So remember, he always had a bit of tension with Angela Merkel back in those days. But really, Michael, right now, I feel like everywhere we look on the news has been dominated by the situation happening in Iran. We know this NATO summit is happening. Ukraine was meant to be heavily up there on the agenda, but I think it's possibly overshadowed now.
I don't see how it cannot be overshadowed. I think you and I disagree with this. You don't think that Trump will go to NATO.
I don't think Trump will go to NATO. No, I can't. I actually would be surprised if he goes to NATO. I wouldn't be surprised if he sends the likes of Pete Hegseth or J.D. Vance in the position, but I think Donald Trump right now is probably not in that position, or probably has bigger things to deal with in NATO in his mind.
So I think that I don't know if Trump will go or not. I also think that for NATO leaders, it will be disappointing if he doesn't go, because having an opportunity to speak to the vice president, I don't think is the same, because that would assume that the vice president would go back and tell Donald Trump, and I don't know that the president would necessarily care what his vice president has to say. I think if Donald Trump does go to the NATO summit, though, it's an opportunity for the NATO leaders to present a scenario where they can somehow explain to Donald Trump that the threat that Israel and the US felt from Iran and the wider global community as well, because of the potential of a nuclear weapon. That's what Europe feels by Russia and Vladimir Putin. I think they need to draw that correlation while this attack is fresh, so that Donald Trump has a better understanding about what it is that Europe and the Ukraine is dealing with on a daily basis.
So, you know, we talk about NATO and we talk about this 5% of GDP increase in spending for the NATO countries. We've been speaking about this increase, I feel like, since Donald Trump's first term. He was pretty adamant that that was going to happen. NATO didn't prepare itself. They didn't prepare itself. They didn't get up their spending to what it was. So now we're saying, OK, 5% GDP by when, Gemma?
2035.
2035.
Yeah.
Hold on. Right now, we've got a war between Russia and Ukraine. We have this Middle East crisis happening. Are NATO just sort of behind the curve?
But I think, yes, they are. But we have to understand that what Donald Trump has done over the past few months is change 80 years of American foreign policy.
Yeah.
But where are the European leaders?
But it didn't matter, though, because up till now, you had America always coming in to save what was perceived to be, or who was perceived to be, the good guy. So even if you were only spending 1%, I'm a Canadian, and if the Russia attacks us in Canada, we are expecting the Americans to come to our rescue. And I think that the global community accepts that that would probably be the case. When the Americans have bases in the Middle East, and they have bases in Asia, and they have bases throughout Europe as well, the understanding is that you have those bases there so that you can help the host country.
I don't think, for all Trump's moaning about NATO, about they don't want to be the world police anymore, I think they secretly do want to be the world police because it's such a dominating position to be in. I honestly don't believe when they say, we're tired of saving you guys, or that kind of language. I believe that they actually love this position that they're in. But and anyone who's in like the top dog position, they're allowed to let off steam every now and then, and sort of say, oh, this is annoying, we don't like this. But yes, I think ultimately as well, when it comes to NATO, Trump, as we've seen, he doesn't like to be in these big group events. You said earlier, I said he's America first, you said no, he's me first, which is completely true. We've seen him grow tired of being surrounded by all this decision-making, which is making phone calls, and you'd think he'd love these deals, but he doesn't. He just wants
results.
to... Yes, exactly, he wants to be in and out.
He wants the headline.
He wants the headline.
And you said something, I'm going to interrupt you there for a second, because you said something really, really good, and I agree. I think that they do secretly want to be the world police. And I think if the Americans could, or if Donald Trump could somehow charge Germany a fee that they would have to pay every year, and Germany wouldn't have to spend any money on military, I think Donald Trump would be happy with that.
I'd choose that.
I'm not so sure about that. It would be interesting to... I think Germany, and in a lot of feelings in NATO, needs to pull its weight more. Germany is Europe's biggest economy.
Yes.
And it has never really lived up to the standard. I think it hits just the 2% target of NATO. And Germany could be doing a lot more, and I think that is the argument coming from Donald Trump as Europe's biggest economy.
But Germany, as Europe's biggest economy, as you rightly point out, have done an awful lot. And as a result of what they have done and the growth they've achieved, they've brought along so many other European nations. Yeah. Now, has it been spent where Donald Trump would like the Germans and the Europeans to spend it? No. But Joe Biden was fine with it. Barack Obama was fine with it. Bill Clinton was. Everybody else, for 80 years, they've been okay with it. And the truth is, in 4 more years, the Europeans, I'm sure the next president will be okay with it.
And I think Trump's argument is that NATO should look after itself and start spending more so that the US can concentrate more on the China side of things. That's the argument. I'm just putting it into play. But 5%, Gemma, Cold War levels.
Yeah, so this really interested me. So the 5% takes the GDP spend back to what was being spent during the Cold War. It's a very interesting fact, but it feels like a step backwards.
History always repeats
Yes,
itself,
it does.
dare I say it. But thank you so much. Very interesting conversation. And I don't want anyone to give me hate about saying Donald Trump's not going to go to the NATO summit. That's just a prediction. So don't take it as gospel. And we're going to move on to another story now. And Tesla have finally rolled out their long-awaited robo-taxis, which appeared on the roads of Austin, Texas this weekend. Tesla posted videos of invited guests who included influencers, shareholders and analysts to test ride out these new Teslas. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has congratulated the AI and chip design team for their decade of hard work. Okay, so there we are. What do you make of these robo-taxis, Gemma? And would you go on one? I don't actually know anything about them. I'm sorry.
Robo-taxis.
Yeah.
So we had this discussion earlier. Michael and I are on complete opposite sides of the coin here. I don't use ChatGPT.
Okay.
And I barely use self-service checkouts at the supermarket, both of which you're a huge fan of. So I actually disagree with the concept of the robo-taxi on kind of ideological grounds.
Okay.
I see driving as it's a huge job worldwide, whether you're delivering packages or people or food. It's a job that has quite sort of low barrier to entry. It's a job that we see people make careers out of, but also in the US as well, with the economy crunch, we're seeing teachers become drivers on the weekend, you know, become drivers in the evenings, doing DoorDash, doing deliveries to make extra money. And so I just see this as chipping away at a job that so many people do worldwide, and whether that is their career or it's their safety net. So I can only see this as Musk, the billionaire, chipping away at more jobs. That's how I see it. I'm not his biggest fan anyway. Would I get him one? No, I don't think any kind of self-driving has yet proven its safety worth.
I would probably be pretty nervous to get in one too. I'm not going to lie about that. But has Tesla completely, Michael, here missed the boat? Because this was meant to be launched in August. Well, it must have been August last year. Oh, I've lost my mind. But anyway, they're late to the game, let's put it that way. There's so many rivals now. Is Robotaxi just one of the many?
So, yes, just one of the many, and that's okay. I would argue that it's okay not to be first, second, or even third. I
always want to be first.
That's because of your competitive spirit. I think what Musk has to do is focus on rehabilitating his image, making sure that he is able to bring some victories to Tesla and to some of his companies. He needs to prove, I think, to shareholders that he is a businessman who's focused on the businesses that he owns. I think he also needs to make sure that he doesn't have any big mistakes, which is why it's okay not to be the first with this. And I'm going to, as I do sometimes, give my age away. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, there was the Betamax, which was the home video format that everybody was interested in having. And
I'll join you in the age there, because we had a Betamax at home.
there you go. They were
We had VHS.
Well, they were the first, and the consensus is that the quality of what you watched through Betamax was actually better than VHS. But VHS, either it was their marketing or whatever else they did, they were the ones that came out victorious. And I think Elon Musk needs to recognize that it's not about first, it's about getting it right. He needs to get his reputation right, and then he needs to make sure that he gets the cars right. And if he can somehow make sure that the global community starts to see him the way they did a couple of years ago, I think the robotaxis will be fine.
Do you think he's neglected Tesla for a long time?
For sure.
For the White House and for SpaceX as well?
And for Starlink, I think he has so, and for X, I think he has so many businesses on the go. He has so many children. He has so many partners. He has an awful lot. He's stretched incredibly thin. And yet he needs to make sure that, again, the shareholders see him as a businessman who's able to turn around a business.
Or also concentrate on his core product. Because I think that's a lot of what's been going wrong. If you look at Elon Musk, like you said, he's got so many different strands that it's Tesla that was the beginning of it. And I do know that investors and shareholders were really keen for this Robotaxi to get going. You know, in Q1 earnings and forecasts that happened, it was a big disappointment to investors that the promise of the Robotaxi hadn't been fulfilled. So I think now is really the time, like you say, for Elon Musk just to get back to the core of his business. But I think it's difficult to bring a reputation back from the brink.
Tesla had so much goodwill. I remember just, it was saving the environment. It was, you know, this electric vehicle, but it also had power. You know, it wasn't, you know, sort of just doing like 20 miles an hour.
Cool.
And and it looked great. It was sleek, it was new, it was fresh, and Musk was fresh and exciting. There's just been so much reputational damage done over the association with the White House and his sort of public behaviours, that I do think being a bit more low-key, you know, perhaps stepping out of the limelight a bit, I do think you can get that back, but you have to be seen to put the work in.
Yeah, and I think his core business is his reputation. And I think that's what he needs to work on the most. And if he can get back to that period when he was seen as this bit of wonderkind, right? I think that might start to change the perception around him. But he's got a lot of work to do. I mean, everything from just a couple of weeks ago, it seems like it was so long ago, but a couple of weeks ago, he put out the tweets about Trump and the Epstein files, ended up taking it down and then apologizing. But this is the stuff, it's almost as though somebody needs to take his phone away from him so that he can't damage his reputation.
I agree. I think Tesla used to have so much goodwill, and a lot of that was down to the fact that everyone really thought Elon Musk was the genius of our generation. Changing, you know, I also think electric vehicles, he made sort of, you know, being environmentally friendly quite glamorous.
He made it sexy.
He did.
Yeah.
Dare we say? Elon Musk, sexy. Wow.
No, Elon Musk not sexy.
I was about to say Gemma. And finally, Michael and Gemma, you've come up with a couple of quirky stories for today. And Michael, I absolutely love this story. And it's about surfing dogs at Huntington Beach.
So this one I picked specifically for you because I know how much you care about your dogs. So the Purina Pure Plan Incredible Dog Challenge Western Regional Competition took place California, Huntington Beach, as you said. Petey the surf dog won for the second year in a row the small dog category.
Look at him on the
He is a
screen.
6-year-old West Highland White Terrier. And in the large category, it was Koa, who is a female Labrador, 11 years old, also won for the second year in a row. And I really like the quote from Koa's trainer, who said that Koa has discovered her passion, and she's just like any Southern California kid who wants to surf.
I just think those pictures are so lovely, aren't they? We've had like a bit of a heavy news day, and just to see like wonderful little dogs
out surfing, why not?
But I was just thinking, how would you train a dog to surf? That is the mission, and especially a terrier, because I've got 2 terriers and they are law unto themselves.
He's going to have a target on his back as well. He's won 2 years in a row.
That's right, yes.
Someone's going to be training their dog for next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Leigh-Ann, you could spend your year
Yes,
doing.
I could indeed, I'll have to find make waves
Yes.
in the bath, maybe, possibly.
And get started.
And get started, there we are. That is my mission. But Gemma, I think this is a great story. Police in London are searching for a stolen violin, and I just think this is just as British can be.
Yeah, this has been the make Leigh-Ann laugh and finally section. So yeah, a violin worth over £150,000 are stolen from a London pub. Now it's 285 years old.
Wow.
It was made in Florence in 1740.
Gosh.
And the owner said it's incredibly precious and priceless. Now there is CCTV footage of a man walking out of this pub with this almost 300-year-old violin. And it is very British that this person took their almost 300-year-old violin, priceless, to the pub, propped it up somewhere. Perhaps they'd just been at
playing it.
Yeah, playing. Perhaps they'd been at rehearsals, because it belongs to a member of the London Philharmonic Orchestra.
Okay.
But I do think as well, Brits are so used to history. We are surrounded by it, castles and ruins and Stonehenge, that we can take it a little bit for granted. So I just assume that this person just thought, oh, I'm just going to stick my violin, my priceless violin, just there on the seat. And then someone's walked in and walked off with it.
I mean, I'm just going to say one thing. The English pub can get a little bit fun, can't it? Rowdy.
It can get a little bit rowdy,
Yeah.
but it's not as well. What traditionally people steal from pubs is not a violin.
No,
so
that's
you
true.
have to wonder if this has been stolen to order. Had someone had their eye on it and, you know, this person has stepped in and taken it. But if they did, they didn't do a very good job of hiding their face because their face is all over CCTV. So you've got not a great burglar there, for starters, you know, if it has been stolen to order. But yes, perhaps someone was a bit too casual with their priceless violin.
Absolutely crazy. But I used to work in a pub for many years in London when I was studying at university. And the stuff that got stolen from the pub was just incredible.
Yes.
And very popular. Glasses obviously get stolen all the time. You know, as soon as you put a candle outside in the summertime, all the candles got stolen.
I'm sure the ashtrays go as well.
Everything.
Probably even bar stools, I think. If you create a big enough distraction, you can walk out with
I remember
anything.
always the pot plants, you know, they used to put the basket of pansies outside in the summer and it was gone. But I mean, what do you think of all of this? The violin?
I prefer a Canadian bar.
Well, where they don't steal anything.
Nobody steals anything.
Wow. Oh, wow, okay.
I think maybe it's because we're there to socialize and to have a
No,
drink.
we're there to socialise, just
And that's it.
Brits are at the pub to socialise.
We're not there to take from the pub. And usually in bars in Canada, I don't think that there's anything worthwhile. And if you are so intoxicated, then you're so distracted that you're even less inclined to take something.
I have a story.
Are you sure you want to go down this road?
I'm going to go down this route. But I was in a bar once and it was towards the end of the night and I walked out and there was a really beautiful vase on a shelf in the bar. So I went to pick it up and it was glued on the shelf.
They were expecting you.
And I still remember that being probably one of the most embarrassing moments of my life because everyone was completely judging me.
How long were you trying to get it up for, or did you discover it quite early on?
Like I did it once and then I was like, oh, this is a bit tough. And then I did it again and then I was like, oh my gosh, it's glued.
So that's an owner who obviously knew what was going to happen.
British
There's
pubs?
a lot of us. Yeah, we have to take you to a British pub.
Yeah.
Michael, you might leave with...
Don't bring your violin, though.
Yeah, don't bring a violin.
I'll bring a dog.
You might leave with a pot plant.
I'll bring a dog.
Bring a cello. No
Bring
one's
a
going to
dog.
steal that.
Dog.
Yeah, bring a dog and a cello. Not the karaoke kit, but thank you so much. Yeah, really great stories. And nice to always remember the London pubs.
Very nice. Trip down memory lane.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you to today's guest. Managing Director of This is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, and Correspondent and Columnist Gemma White. And just a reminder, Iran has fired missiles at Qatar tonight in retaliation to the US attack on their nuclear bases at the weekend. Iran's Tasnim news agency confirmed the operation was called Annunciation of Victory. The strike came hours after Qatar closed its airspace amid safety fears. Qatar says no casualties have been reported, but it does strongly condemn the attack. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess-Watson is coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.